I'm Max Venus, and in this video we're going to look at reverbs in FL Studio. So there's two reverbs to choose from in FL Studio. You've got the convolution reverb, which is a convolution reverb, which means you can use impulses and create real spaces. And then there's also the Fruity Reeverb 2, which is a digital algorithmic reverb, more of a digital sounding reverb, but you can get some nice results using it as well. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples on how I would use these in a project. I've got this track here that I'm working on. It's got a vocal on it. Okay, so that's the vocal I'm going to use for this example, but I'm going to choose the convolver for the vocal. So this is the convolution reverb in FL. So you can have a listen to this. I'm just going to solo out the vocal. So you can hear that it sounds like it's in a real space now. It's almost as though it's reverbing in a cathedral or something. It sounds pretty good. So there's a few different types of impulses you can use. Chambers, corridors, exteriors. These all give different textures. So if we just listen to maybe this field clearing impulse, so you can see it loads a different impulse in, and we can introduce that. So that gives a really short reverb, very short tail, almost puts it in a box. So let's look at something with a bit more space. Coming back into the impulses here. So we've got some chambers, let's have a look at those. So there's even like cafeterias, auditoriums, warehouses. Let's have a look at one of these auditoriums. So maybe wide at the back. So it adds just a bit of room in there, which is quite nice on this vocal. So you've also got the dry level here. This is adjusting the input into this reverb. It's basically just the dry level that's being driven into this into the reverb. It is an insert, so that's entirely the signal flow. You can adjust the stereo separation of the signal coming in, and then adjust the stereo separation of the signal coming out as well. So you've got control over both in and out on the wet there. There's a pre-delay time. Then you've got self-convolution amount as well, so it actually modulates itself. What it does is it replays it in. Again, it just creates more texture, more sound. And then you can also stretch out that impulse using the stretch function. So there's also the EQ functionality here. It gives you access to this equalizer. So you can see there's a spectrum version of the sound there, and you can see where the signal path is coming in, and you can cut the section that you want to remove. So I can just pull down here in the high frequency and introduce this. So this is going to affect the wet signal coming out of this reverb. So you can hear I'm introducing the highs more. Becomes really sparkly and boomy down there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull out the low frequency here. I'm going to leave the highs, just so we're getting a nice clean signal and none of that interference from some of the low frequencies. So now we're using this convolution reverb to really put this vocal in a space. So let's listen to it in the track. Okay, So now I'm going to show you the Fruity Reverb 2. In most cases, I'm going to use this on potentially a crash or some kind of sound effect. It gives quite a nice bright sound. You've got real control over the frequencies again with this one. So I'm just going to solo out this crash. So it's a reverse crash. It just cuts straight off. It's just audio at the moment. I'm going to add a insert. I'm going to use Fruity Reverb 2 here. So this is Fruity Reverb 2. You've got the wet and the dry over on the right-hand side here. So as you introduce more wet, you're introducing more of that reverb signal. So you can see you've got a little tail there. If you wanted to increase the tail, you've obviously got this decay knob here. So you can up that to about 10 seconds to get a real decay going. So now we're creating more of an epic sound on there. If you wanted to really push it a bit more, this damp knob is ultimately like a low cut filter on it. So as we up the damp, all of that high frequency information is being retained. There's also a high cut option here. So if you wanted to remove it and fine tune it, this is a high and low cut for the reverb signal, for the wet signal. So we can cut out the lows and make sure we're getting all of those highs there. So we've just low cutted a bit, and then we've also high cutted around 13K. Don't really need any of the information above that. You can change the size here, so increase the space that it's in or reduce it to make it more of a boxy sounding reverb. Sounds quite good on here. But again, that's more open. It's more of the sound we're going for on this one. There's modulation, so you can actually frequency modulate the reverb. It can give it more of a natural sound, less digital. Let's introduce some of that. You can control the speed of that modulation here as well. Okay, so that's a bit of modulation. It's probably a bit too much. I'm going to dial it back, get it to more of a natural sound. Okay. So the bass multiplier, if you've got low frequency in it, it ultimately doubles up depending on how far you push this. So you can go up to like 200% here, go all the way up to 300%. But in this sound, because we've low cut it anyway, this knob's not really going to do much. Then the crossover is where the low cut actually is crossed over in terms of frequency. So everything below here in the top left, you can see as I'm moving this knob, sorry, the value that this is set to. So everything below 500 would be considered the bass, and that's where it would be multiplied from. So you can change that crossover there. Okay, and then just the final knob here we've got is the stereo separation. So you can completely mono out the reverb signal by pushing that all the way to the right. So now you can hear the reverb signal is completely in the middle, or the opposite, a super wide reverb sound. So I think that's probably going to sound quite nice on this crash going in here. I'm going to actually take a decision to remove this hit and just let the crash run its tail. Let's have a listen to this in the mix. Okay, so we've looked at two different types of reverb in FL Studio, the Fruity Convolver, which is a convolution reverb, and the digital reverb, the Fruity Reverb 2.